Welcome to the Barbara Christensen podcast. The views expressed during this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the streaming services or the host, and these are being shared for entertainment possibilities only. Please connect with your doctor before taking on any new wellness activities, changing your diet or supplementation routine. Barbara Christensen is a certified personal trainer holding a diploma in nutrition and additional certifications in aromatherapy, Reiki, and other energetic and therapeutic modalities. This podcast will open your mind to the tools to clear the chaos from your life, from your body, release the beliefs in your being, activate your awareness, and remove any blocks holding you back from the life you want to live. Now let's get started. Welcome to the podcast, guys. We are really having a pretty good start to January, I think, for most of us. So if you're enjoying your January, if you are letting go of what you need to, then pat yourself a little bit on the back there. It's really interesting because I run a tarot reading, channeling, YouTube channel. I always get, when I open up my personal YouTube, right, I get all of these tarot suggestions. Now, one of these that comes up as the suggestions for me is one of the most probably annoying salesmen on YouTube, who unfortunately is also a gifted guide. But this person brings Zen into the equation all the time about our divine relationships when talking about, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And I agree with those sort of points that he makes about how we cannot have that divine union, right, with ourselves or any other soulmate if we aren't in that flow state. But where I disagree is that the idea that he has that you do not have to heal your soul in order to have union within a divine partnership or twin flame, but especially within the twin flame, because the idea of the twin flame is that there were so many lessons that you wanted to learn to raise the frequency of the collective, that when you came here, your soul, normally what happens, our soul is living in a multiverse, okay? And so our soul is an ocean, and our reality in this dimension is just a drop of that ocean. You're still of the ocean, but you're out of the ocean, right? So it's in both the ocean and separate from the ocean. Now, when you come into this lifetime with the idea that you're going to connect with a twin flame connection, that you're going to learn all of these lessons, your soul says, okay, I'm going to put 2 drops of the ocean into this lifetime. And that creates this very beautiful connection that when you meet, you go through this magnificent downfall of discreation so that you can create anew, right? It's like the what is being created that I cannot see. That's what it's all about. Now, in most lifetimes, we come here to work with soul contracts to learn valuable lessons, to heal the collective ocean, and to raise the frequency of both of what we will call heaven and earth. Now, heaven being what most people see as the new earth, which is already created. The realism of what the new earth is, from what I have been told, is something that's not going to actually be created for a lot of lifetimes, okay? And so it's important, though, to remember that our reality is mere seconds compared to, like, for the spiritual realm. You come here, you live a lifetime, you go back, time has hardly changed. It's why when you get into the shamanic realm, it feels like it's just been a second, but in all actuality, you get out of an hour-long journey, and it feels like you were only in the journey for like 3 seconds, but you were actually not in this reality for an hour. So, all right, if Zen, okay, is the art of seeing into the nature of one's own being, which points the way from bondage to freedom, right? Then if we do not work on our inner healing, we are bound to the old hearts of the feminine and the masculine. And we've started actually working in my Mindset Unicorn Patreon program on the feminine and masculine aspects. And I'm going to continue to do that each week through the year. And I will share these lessons on the Mindset Unicorn channel, but they'll go out a few weeks after they've been given to the Patreon members. That way the Patreon members are getting the guided astrological messages for the correct week, and that's part of their benefit of being a member. But you will still get the feminine and masculine lessons if you are a subscriber to the channel. So, while we can come into relationship with our divine partners without doing the work at a highest level, what many teachers are teaching is more from the divine feminine wound, with that illusion of there actually being a control frequency. There is no control frequency, okay? Eventually, even in the greatest of relationships, when there isn't a growing of the healing of the wounds, of the raising of the vibration, it will turn toxic. Now, initially, that often happens with the divine partnership. It turns toxic because partners, friends, family, lovers, all things turn toxic when they sit in stagnation for too long. And the twin flame union can be with a partner, a friend, a family, or a lover, right? It doesn't have to be one. It can be with any of those. And I've been told by Spirit that they call this energy fermentation. Now, the archaic energy of fermentation process is the body frequency of either agitation or excitement. And this is the gut being chemically sparked by the energy of stagnation. When it's stuck there, right, it comes in with this frustration. When it is in excitement and curiosity, then it sparks the gut, right, in that curious excitement. Now, fermenting these chemicals, right, it breaks down our inner and outer subtle bodies using substances of bacteria, yeast, microorganisms, microenergies that are typically involving effervescence. Okay, so spirit and effervescence are somatically related in characteristic topic, right? So you can sometimes, a lot of times you'll hear people use spirit as a noun, or they might use effervescence as a noun when it comes to like life and animation. Now there's this really cool idea called collective effervescence. And it's a sociological concept that was coined by Emily Durkheim. And it's where a community or society at times comes together and simultaneously communicate the same thought and participate in the same action. So we saw this a lot here in the US, right, with 9/11. We saw this a little more on a global scale, but definitely across Australia with the fires last year or 2 years ago. But the pandemic, right, is the global collective working on a forced awakening. Fermentation gives off heat. I don't think it's a surprise that we had that massive fire in Colorado this last week. If we think in terms of inflammation, we apply heat for muscle pain or stiffness. So when we become too rigid, heat is applied, right? So I think we saw a lot of heat being applied for several years to the earth before we came into the pandemic. So I feel that Mother Earth was really trying to move us out of our rigidity, but we were not listening. We are a stubborn bunch. So how do we get out of the heat and back into the excitement frequency to click open in a more aligned and less caustic state? Well, we have to introduce the cold. When fermenting at cold temperatures, yeast produces carbon dioxide and other molecules, right, more slowly and steadily. When I was first starting to do work in the spiritual realm, not just in my own little world, I would notice I would go to the gym and I would come home and I would be very cold. And then as I started aligning chakras and things like that within myself, I also was getting that cold in my body. And I realized that, right, cold in my body was a sensation that was happening when my body would do a massive cellular dump. So my cells were hiding large amounts of histamine, and when the cells would open, I would feel that physical coldness. So when we start doing energetic work, what I feel is that cold happens for myself personally when I am working on deep ancestral or astral energies, or they'll come in warm when I am working on something that requires speedy delivery. So when we work alone, the process really is only a minuscule leap ahead for the collective. Since we collectively are generally not working in unison, we change, but those around us may not. So when we work at the collective effervescence level, it's reminiscent of the sacred circle of the clan. When the entire tribe gathers together, it becomes a sacred event and a high energy level comes into play. Okay, so this energy can get directed onto physical objects or people, and then that becomes sacred. This is why clans developed totems. So as a symbol of the clan, the totem is a huaka, which I talk about in my book From the Diary of Wu, and it can be called in for times of need for anything from protection to insight. And there was 1212, so a little insight for you. This weekend, when I went into a sacred space with my global clan in my first journey, I was very much in what I would call a mist, and I couldn't really see. Eventually, I realized there was water under the mist, and there were stones that appeared to be like Stonehenge, okay? So very ancient energy underneath, but it was misty. So I went into this misty forest into my eye, and Mother Spider asked me what I was willing to see. We had been talking in the group about this idea of remaining nimble, and I'm shown it's both about being in our light energetically, but also about being agile to adapt in body and mind. So as I walked down the dark path, Mother Spider was swinging in front of me, guiding my path to where I was taken to a boat. And I went onto the boat, and it was still misty, but as the mist dissipated, I was on the water in Venice, in a boat, but I could not see what was behind me. I went under several bridges before the journey came to an end with the message that I am always connected to my soul, right? So we're always connected to the ocean, right? Now, Thomas Kincaid, some of you may know if you've read the book already, some of you may not, is my upper realm teacher and guide. And he has many masterpieces that are a part of the Venice that I traveled through. And he told me in a later journey that when I see the mist, he is calling me to lessons. Now, if you remember, he was called the painter of light, okay? And he passed just before we entered the Bakatan in the Mayan new calendar in 2012, right? 12/12, December 12/12. So his art is spiritually wakas that are hanging in homes across the world that can be used to tap into this sacred space of light. And he once said, it's not the world we live in. It is the world we wished we lived in. People wish they could find that stream, that cabin in the woods, right? So his paintings are like a portal into the shamanic realm. Now, like myself, Kincaid was an alcoholic that found sanctuary in this work he did with his spiritual gift. And I believe, and I could be wrong, it's just my personal opinion, that he literally died in his dark night of the ego. I feel that he had been awakened by his girlfriend a year and a half before, and maybe she was just a karmic soulmate, but she could have been a divine partner. But I like to think that the spiritual part of him is working with me and probably many others to save us from hitting the deep lows that took his life. Because he actually passed taking pills and drinking at the same time, right? And I know that when you look for his Venice paintings, the gallery says if there was ever a place to fall in love, it would be here. Any visitor arriving in Venice is immediately transported into another world. And so I understand why he took me there. Now, in the group, in the clan, right, as we went around the sacred circle sharing our adventures, I found that each person actually had a little piece of the collective message that Mother Spider had told me to see. So, we've been through such a long several years of separation, right? I feel like a lot of us feel very internally separate from our inner being, our inner source. And through this global spiritual essence of forced awakening, there is this feeling of loneliness going through your darkness alone. And I feel that if this podcast finds you and resonates with you, that this is your mist to let you know that you are not alone. And you can always find that portal to where there is a place to fall in love. In love with yourself, in love with your life, in love with someone else, whatever it means to you. Now, in the circle, the masculine tiger came out first, talking to my feminine tiger, okay, saying that our hearts beat together. Our inner and outer energies are meant to be supportive of each other rather than creating guilt and grief for following our path of life, right? The tiger took us to the bridges that I was under in Venice, and we were shown that the bridge to each other is still being built. Okay, it is not yet completed. And I do see this metaphorically and very aligned to the fact that we are still in this soup of this global situation. So we're being shown with the tiger, right, that we need a little courage. And we can take and go within the tiger to gain courage and strength in this new year. And I feel like that's also because, right, we're gaining illumination still. Some people may see a tiger and others a jaguar. They do come from the same galactic and feline family. Then the other sacred travelers joined the circle. The lioness, this empress, gave of her heart, right? And the serpent, mother serpent, such a mama, came in to give us the energy to clear fear. right? To grow out of the fear that we have cultivated for the last 2 years. The hawk came in to bring us the stardust. And I love that because I see Hank Wesselman now as the hawk. And he came in to remind us that we are stardust, right? Hank told me in Journey that we are all rainbows made of stardust. And so chakras, right, which is really coming through in what I'm writing in the new book, but reminding us that we are not just stardust, but we are all connected. So these guides asked us to stay in this space for a moment, open to receive these gifts. Even with the chaos that can be around us and swirling and swimming in our thoughts right now, they asked us to say that we are safe, to open our hearts and our minds. Then the swan, who I see as divine feminine energy, if you have read Celestial Spark, okay, the mate of the masculine tiger, Amor, came in again to remind us to be agile and not so rigid. She became Mother Bear, the protector of the north, closing the cross of the circle, which we usually don't talk about the cross of the circle. This is what just came through my spirit guides. So our ancestors are always there to keep us safe. However, it's important to remember that Mother Bear was wounded. Okay? And I feel like this is a reminder that we must keep unwinding those karmic feminine lessons as we are only in the alchemy of our current auric body. So clearing space for the next level of our soul's journey. It did come through, I feel like, in the first week of the feminine embodiment work with Patreon, that the feminine was working with the feminine. Okay, it may have been in the masculine's journey in the second week, but just know that the feminine needs to work with the feminine, right? The feminine needs to clear out the need to control. The wolf, our pack, our ego, comes in flashes, in moments of our lives, okay, pulling on our solar plexus. So ask yourself, how can you trust that these flashes of light and the shadow work are for our highest good? Now, I'm starting my 500 plus hour yoga training, and that has been in flashes. Like I had this oh, I'm going to do it this day and on this day, and I'm going to do this and that, right? And I then kind of let the chaos come in and sort of take over here and there. And Spirit really gave a little nudge that we have to sometimes be disciplined in fitting in the spiritual work, because it's the movement of energy that our body and soul and even the health of our mind require. And they'll help us to keep from doubting ourselves when we're downloading from the energy field. Now, you guys know I'm a lot of woo, and I'm not really religious, even though I have had lots of religious people come in to my channeled messages. But I was shown 1 Corinthians 14, 1-40 ESV, okay? And it says, pursue love and earnestly desire the spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. For one who speaks in tongues speaks not to men, but to God, for no one understands him, but he utters mysteries in the Spirit. On the other hand, the one who prophesies speaks to people for their upbuilding and encouragement and consolation. The one who speaks in tongue builds up himself, but the one who prophesies builds up the church. And I do see this as the clan and the church being the collective. Okay, so when you're working on yourself and you're gaining that spiritual connection and you're doing your meditation, right? Yeah, you're building up yourself. It's beautiful, right? You're speaking to universal energy. But when you open up to speak and share these lessons that you've gained right? And you join with others in this part of this collective, right? That you are building up with everyone. So when we gather in the podcast, on YouTube, in the sacred space, we are speaking of the prophecy that is meant for collective ascension energy. And you also have to remember when we also speak about, like, the one who speaks in tongue builds up himself, some people are out there just to make you a slave to the church of them. Okay, they are only interested in themselves. Take that where it resonates. Know that this really has nothing to do with money or popularity, because money is an energy exchange. And I believe that we all should be making money, right? We all should be able to receive money because that is the currency that this world has chosen. And spirit does require that we give and receive. But there has to be that give as well, right? It keeps things from being toxic and stagnant. So if you are working with someone spiritually and you find that your progression is stagnating and there aren't good things coming into your life, there's just a lot of negativity, you're probably working with someone who's not trying to raise the frequency of the collective, that's trying to raise the frequency of themselves. Okay? And that brings me back to the message where our partners, friends, family, lovers, all things can turn toxic when they sit in stagnation for too long. Anything that is not moving that fermentation along, right, it can turn sour. It can create a cloud rather than a mist. And when you are fermenting foods, one of the most common visible contaminations is a white, cloudy substance called cam yeast. And while cam yeast isn't harmful, it can indicate that there is a problem with your ferment. Now, we see a lot in vinegar pickles, that cloudy brine that can indicate spoilage or contamination. And I see vinegar in that instance of being really like a preservative holding things in that stagnant place. However, when you ferment in brine, like that salty brine, salt is a medicine, I've been shown, right? Not in the term of pharma, but in the term of like spiritual medicine. Then that cloudy brine is a clue that you are creating a healthy bacterial community, okay? And even beer, right, can become cloudy or hazy. And a lot of like beer makers will talk about that clear beer. But there is a secret in the cold, stable haze that comes in to make a really tasty beer, right? Cold, again, comes from the inner, deeper work, not from the surface. So when I continued my journey with the group, the path was sunny and I was walking barefoot and the path turned to sand. I walked onto the beach and I danced, and I remembered that each grain of sand has its place, and yet because of the ocean and the elements, sand is always changing. I saw a starfish that appeared to be dying, and starfish are my symbol of the wish. And I have to believe that we all have a dying wish or two within us right now, right? And so as I picked up this starfish, the collective starfish, I could feel its past trauma, the abuse it's suffering. Bullying was a big part of what I felt. I feel like that's been over at least the last 6 to 8 years. And I saw that it had been thrown far away from where it knew it belonged, and I felt that sadness. So I picked up the starfish and I walked with the starfish in my hand into the ocean until it told me that it was far enough out to be released. And when I released it, I looked back to the beach and it was far, far away by then. Now, instead of getting afraid, because if you know me, you know that I can't actually swim, I turned onto my back and I became a starfish. And I floated in this blissful energy of the ocean, letting myself be in that flow state. As I was floating, I fell asleep, and the eagle picked me up and took me to the upper realm. Thomas Kincaid greeted me, and we walked into the studio, and at the edge of the clouds, the edge of the beach, I could see the sun on the horizon. He said the difference between the sunrise and the sunset is just a little different shading of perspective. And he taught me to paint the two. We talked about endings and beginnings. And then we walked through the upper realm deep in conversation. And it really was very beautiful. So I hope that you guys have a beautiful week. And I hope that you have a blessed 2022. And it was just 29/11, so 11/11, beautiful synchronicity. You are enlightenment. Let yourself open up and receive what is meant for you. All right? Much love, my friends. Aho.